Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer and also generally very creative artist and painter and much more. It's the one and only Gitane Demone, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Was once in various bands, including Pompeii 99 and also Christian Death. Worked with Ros Williams and has collaborated with other various people, plus has got a new album out with Paul Rosler, which is titled The New Young Kings of Midnight, which is out on Dark Vinyl Records that you'll hear more about towards the latter half of the interview. But this is the interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Gitane, it's over to you.
I was born in 1958, so there was an array of great artists growing up in the 1960s. I think, I really liked the acid rock era. I liked Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. Doors were more psychedelic. I didn't care too much for bubblegum pop, which there was plenty of at that time. In the 1970s, I loved some of the prog rock, actually, and I loved Bowie, T-Rex. They were part of my record collection. Yes. I loved Hendrix, and I loved Janis Joplin's singing. She was so emotive, obviously.
Yes.
I loved all kinds of music. I would pick up on different musical trends from guys that I was hanging around with. Like I got into New York soul, and I got into reggae and dub music, and I got into all kinds of music. It's just, I can't say that. It always enlightened me. Music always,
yes.
These artists always there was something fresh and new or deep and emotional that resonated. So yeah,
yes. And did your parents have any kind of influence on you? Were they at all artistic or culturally kind of aware of stuff, or sort of had some passion that kind of, interested or sparked a sort of a path in your life?
Well, they were really into music. It was a kind of musical family, but my dad was into classical music. Both my parents enjoyed going to concerts, symphony concerts. My mom was really into Odetta and Johnny Cash and folk music, and it didn't really resonate with me then. But it's come back to me now. I've always loved Johnny Cash.
Yes.
She liked Muddy Waters, but she was really liking the Pete Seeger and things like that, and somehow that didn't quite get me. I like Bob Dylan, though, some of his songs, and come to have more of an appreciation. My dad, like I said, was when we'd ride in the car, he would be playing classical music and being a conductor kind of while he was driving. So now I'm into classical music. I love orchestral music, and listen to a lot of flamenco music lately. A lot of canciones auténticas. I like Federico Garcia Lorca and La Argentinita. I've been listening to a lot of that. I had a tape in the early 90s, and I've gone back to listening to that and a lot of other artists that are really, really extreme vocalists, and just
Yes.
I don't dare get envious because it's kind of too late for me to develop that area. But oh my gosh, it's again, it's really
Yes.
enlightening to hear that kind of emotion. So
So when
I'm a
did
really yes. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when did you start to discover your own singing voice? Because that's quite incredible and powerful and confident. Did you start singing quite an early age?
Well, I did, but not with any kind of serious intent at all until I was around 20. So I was really late. I always sang, but I never thought that I would actually be a singer. So
Yes.
um, I was asked to be a backing vocalist for a girl when I was about 20, and I said, "Well, I don't really know how to sing," and she said, "Well, practice." And once I started practicing, that was it. There was no turning back. So
Yes. And
that
did
was
you,
it.
because you mentioned prog rock, and it's kind of interesting because I
Mhm.
had a brother who was a bit older than me. He's 7 years older, so
Yeah,
he was probably born around the same time. So he was at that perfect age to sort of get into that world that was, the prog
yeah.
bands of that time, like yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barker James Harvest, all those kind of bands. Was that the prog that you were also listening to, or was it a slightly different prog
Um,
rock?
well, I was listening to I like Tangerine Dream. I don't know if you can call King Crimson prog rock.
Oh,
Uh,
I put them as prog rock, kind of a bit. Yeah,
yeah,
they're
and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I did like their work, and my dad actually liked their work as well. When I'd be listening, he'd come in and listen to it. I had, a lot of the stuff that I got into was influenced by friends that were older than me as well.
yes.
And I found things that I liked, and I liked that. I liked early Fleetwood Mac, really earlier Fleetwood Mac. I didn't like the Stevie Nicks period, I have to say, at all. It was
No.
really, very poppy, but they had some interesting early
Well, yes,
stuff, I thought.
psychedelic blues from Peter Green was quite something, wasn't it?
Exactly. He was great, and
He was a genius. So
yes,
when so when we got to 74, when you were 16, I mean, punk rock had started to emerge in different
yeah.
forms and different ways. Did you, at that stage, did you leave school or did you then continue on to college and kind of some sort of further education?
Well, I wasn't very enamored of school at all. I graduated high school early and took off, and ended up in San Francisco, actually going to junior college up there, and I actually saw punk rock, the start of it right there. I saw the very start of it. That seemed like things changed overnight.
Yes.
Riding around on the buses and going to school and everything, and people, the look changed, and unfortunately I had to move again. Otherwise I would have been probably gotten right involved in it. I loved the music, but I moved to a another area of California, Santa Cruz, which is south, and
Yes.
kind of a bizarre little, it was a hippie town, and there started a punk rock movement there, and I got involved with it there. So I was making flyers. I had a boyfriend who was a punk rock guitar player, and he had a band, and there were different bands. There was a whole little kind of little community of punk rock, and so yeah, I got involved with it there, and that was exciting. We went up to the Mabuhay.
Oh my God, there's all these live albums coming out from that particular venue, aren't there? Sort of someone's found a lot of cassettes or recordings of live shows that have been released very recently in the last 12
Oh,
months.
oh, great. Yeah. Well, it was a busy place, a
It was a
happening place,
busy
a
place.
busy place. Yeah, it was finished by the time I was in a band, and we played on the same street on Broadway. We played at the Broadway, which wasn't far from the Mabuhay, but that was in the late late 1983, I think it was.
Right, there you
Oh
go.
yeah,
So
another one.
when bands like, the Damned came along and the Sex Pistols, and then I suppose people, like the Ramones and then Talking Heads, what did that have a massive influence on your kind of musical excitement and journey?
Yeah, it did. It sure it did. It was new and fresh. I had in my little circle, my little punk rock circle, somebody was able to get the records, because in Santa Cruz it wasn't like there were very many underground record stores. You could hear some of it on the radio, on FM radio, and I had a friend who would buy the imported records, and we'd get together and listen and drink and smoke and go out to the local shows that were just these small punk rock bands. You'd see the Ramones came and played in the city hall, I think it was the city auditorium. And this punk rock boyfriend guitar player of mine played with opening for the Ramones. Devo played there. And yeah, we ate it up as much as we could.
Yes, absolutely.
I wasn't trying to be a singer or anything at the time, so it was just, again, really invigorating, enlivening, and fun. A lot of fun.
Yes. So when we got to sort of the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, the musical kind of narrative sort of shifts from that punk period to sort of post-punk, and then there was, in this country, in the UK, the early 80s, we had Thatcher, we had the Falkland War, we had the miners' crisis, Greenham Common, we thought we were going to be nuked, so that was all getting very depressing. So there was kind of the goth movement that started, there was the electronic new romantic movement, there was a bit of New Paisley, there was those kind of bands, I suppose, like, U2, Simple Minds, Big Country started, Julian Cope. Where were you kind of musically at that kind of stage in the early 80s?
Oh, in the early 80s, I was in a band at that time that was sort of a mixture of avant-garde, punk, ska. In LA at the time, you could go to a show and you could see many different types of bands on a bill. I wasn't at the very start of punk in LA. I moved to LA in the late 70s, very late, like 79 probably. And I missed the Mask. The Mask started in 77. That was the kernel, the very germ of the germs, and the early LA punk bands. So I did get in kind of on that wave that you're talking about over here. Let's see. So there was death rock had emerged from the punk scene. It was more theatrical. It wasn't called gothic then.
No.
It was actually death rock. And the band Christian Death, which I later ended up being a part of, there was that band. There was Die Schlaflosen was a band, a death rock band. There was 45 Brave was more of like a horror punk band. I can't remember the name of this one other band with Patrick Motta in it. There were several bands, not that many bands that were involved with death rock.
No, because
the band that I was in, Pompeii 99, would open up for these bands, and so we got involved in that way. There were bands that had a little darker edge to them. Like I said, the shows would be a kind of conglomeration. We played a show with Christian Death, with 45 Grave, with a band that Paul was in, Twisted Roots. Can't remember who else was on that bill, but there were great mixture shows, which I really liked.
Yes, because Pompeii 99, your album, Look at Yourself, that's very ska, isn't it? It's a very boppy track.
It does. It does have ska in it. Some of the tracks are kind of ska influenced, and um, that that was interesting. We were just having fun making songs up. I'd never made a record before, or even been in a band. Been in a band. Actually, I was in a heavy rock band as a vocalist for a while before then. And from there, I went into Pompeii '99, and it was fun. We actually were being groomed by A&M Records, which was
Nice.
very, very bizarre. No, it was very bizarre. It was a very bizarre situation. I think that's when record companies were trying to snap up bands to be formed into new wave bands, product.
Right.
And it we joined Christian Death. Some of us got into Christian Death from Pompeii '99. It was on hiatus, and then Roz was very good friends with the lead guitar player and main singer of Pompeii '99, and they were very good friends. And Roz was changing the band over into a new direction, and so Pompeii '99 sort of went further fraying out of hiatus into non-existence, and I didn't know what I was going to do myself. I was just writing songs in this one bedroom that I rented in the back of a house. And then I was invited to meet Roz Williams, the singer of Christian Death, and went from there. He wanted to have me as keyboard player and backing vocalist. So
Yes, and that all sort of. So immediately was that sort of a yes? Did the stars all align? Did you feel like you were on quite a mission at this stage with
I don't know. I'll tell you, my my interest was to develop my voice. I was really, really involved with singing, and I wanted to become very expressive and to do a lot of things with my voice. And I loved the music of Christian Death. I don't know if I really appreciated where it was going or what an impact it would have. I wanted to perform and keep singing and creating music. So I can't say that I was blindly starstruck and feeling like I was on top of the world. I was pregnant when I got in the band. I was pregnant with my son, and that's a very different reality when you are pregnant and in a death rock band and in the middle of a lot of hedonistic activity around you. So my whole time being in Christian Death, I had 2 children. I had to tour with 2 very small children. I did not want to stay at home with kids. That's why I went on tour being pregnant
yes?
and played. So it's, if any other women have done that, which I'm sure there are, it's a whole other existence than being like pretending to be a rock star or, you know, just indulging in in the lifestyle. What you think at that time, we're talking about the earlier '80s to mid '80s to, it's a very, very pretty wild lifestyle at that time. A lot
Yes,
of
well, it's yes, there was a lot of things were slipping, weren't they? But also, I have heard, a few people who were women who had that experience of having a child, then trying to go on tour with the child, and touring was a nightmare. There was spending all day trying to sort of keep the baby, small child, kind of fed and looked after, and they would get a sickness and they would be throwing up, and then you'd be sorting out various things and then trying to go on stage performing. And nobody was particularly that excited about it because they were young and wanted to, get, like you said, they wanted to be rock stars. They didn't really want to be changing nappies and looking for sort of electric plug adapters to sort of fit into sockets to sort of warm the milk up and stuff like that. So it sounds very interesting for you, having such a sort of a passionate band who had such a following, having that experience when you weren't on stage.
My experience with the kids was really not terrible at all. Not at all. They were good kids. And I mean, I will say that I had to nurse before I went on stage and then nurse when I got off stage, because in those days shows were a lot longer. You'd play for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and with encores and everything. So, there was that. It wasn't that troublesome, and everybody in the band, I mean, Roz was my son's godfather. He loved, my daughter was born when he wasn't around, but later on spent a lot of time with Roz, and he loved the kids. But it wasn't, I mean, the nappy thing is, that nobody wants a nappy. However, they could come in handy if somebody else, an adult, needs to throw up. You can hand them a nappy to throw up in if they're on the bus and unable to make it.
Yes.
My kids were sick, but it was tiring. And of course, everybody else is out, drinking and enjoying whatever's offered to them. And you're staying in with kids, but I loved them. And that was I just looked at it like a different experience,
Yes. Because in that time, I mean, that was what I've noticed with doing all these interviews with bands, is that the intensity during that kind of moment where a band has a zeitgeist and there's that kind of, the stars have aligned and there's like, gosh, it's actually happening. No one's really prepared for that moment, because obviously mostly it doesn't happen for a lot of musicians and bands. But then when it does, it's quite intense, like solid touring, solid recording, then solid touring. So for the next 4 to 5 years with Christian Death, you were having to put out quite a lot of material and lineup changes as well at that time. So that must have been pushing everybody to their limit.
Well, no, it's always been a crazy life for me. Nothing's ever been sure. So in whether I'm in LA or living in London or Amsterdam, things are always a bit dramatic, and I've enjoyed living in Joshua Tree. Things have calmed down some.
Yes.
But I really enjoy peace of mind. And when I was younger, everything was often very dramatic and people were very dramatic, and a lot of good times were in the studio, just focusing on recording. And for me, playing shows, I would play a show, be completely crazy at the show and backstage, and then I would just go to the hotel room and be with my child. And I loved my child, so that was fine for me. But
because the first two releases with the band, there was obviously quite a difference between the first one, Catastrophe Ballet, to Atrocities, because obviously there was lineup changes. What was that like for you as a an artist, and dealing with those kind of people coming and going, and different people taking the mic?
Mean like Roz Williams left in 1985, and I was absolutely heartbroken. For the rest of my time in Christian Death. My two children were with the one who took over vocals, and Valor, and I wanted my kids to have a dad, and Roz understood that too. And Roz and I got back together in 1990. After I left the band, he had written me a letter saying thank you for leaving the band, because we were very close friends. And it was like a betrayal that I stayed with the band, but he understood it. And I was heartbroken after he left. We had a rapport together, and I admired his poetry. I admired his voice. I admired his musical ideas. I admired him as a performer. And all that changed when he left. All of it changed.
Yes.
And so for me, it was like, very honestly, it was like just keeping things together for my kids, until I couldn't anymore. So then I left. And
Yes.
being a vocalist, I mean, I didn't write anything more for the band. I'd written a couple of songs for the band, for Roz. Being a vocalist, of course, I probably, for most of my life, practiced an hour a day. Most of my musical life practiced an hour a day, even in hotel rooms, singing into pillows and things like that, just to keep my chops together. So I still had, great desire to keep my voice together. Being in a band wasn't the end all. I figured I'd want to keep singing for a long time. So
Yes.
I kept up singing. I kept the kids and the dad together um, until 1989, and then
God, that was a big one. Did you tour Europe and the UK during that time with the band?
you mean in the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we actually lived in London from 85 to 89 or 86. I guess we're back in the States for a bit, but we stayed in London and had British members, and um, yeah, and we toured all of Europe. We toured a lot. We toured
Yes.
Italy and Germany, France.
Because most
Yes,
countries have a particular kind of country that has a passion for them, whether it's Italy or Spain. Was there any particular European, country that sort of adored the band?
and I think every country seemed to. I can't think of, we didn't play Spain when I was in the band. It was limited to France, Holland. I think we played Belgium a little bit, maybe a few shows. Germany. We played in what was then Yugoslavia, and we played in, yeah, pretty much just Europe, and a little bit of Eastern Europe. Let's see, we played in Greece once. Yeah, that
And
was
what's your memory of your kind of, I think it was the last album you did with them, which was the Sex and Drugs and Jesus Christ. Was that
well,
what was that kind of like for you at that stage?
well, I'd had my daughter. She would be watched by someone, and I'd go out to the squat that the guitar player and the drummer were living in. We had a generator there, and that's where we recorded it. You have to understand, this band was very poor. Everybody was very poor. We weren't like rolling in money or anything. I don't really know what happened to it. I was not managing the band at all. But it was a very poor band. We weren't
Yes.
making a lot of money. If there, like I said, if there was money coming in, I don't know where it went.
No,
So
blimey. What,
yeah.
what studio did you use for your kind of last couple of albums?
Let's see. Well, there was a squat for Sex, Drugs, and Jesus Christ. Valor, actually, I know where the money went at the end. He'd amassed some equipment and had a little like a rehearsal room or little space, and I don't even remember where we recorded a couple of the last singles, which part of the reason why I quit, I guess. So Scriptures was in Rockfield Studios in Wales.
Because that's quite a famous studio, residential,
Oh yeah,
with lots of
yeah.
countryside.
Catastrophe Ballet was recorded there as well, and it's a very famous studio, and it's brilliant there. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's
Yes.
well. So yeah, those were great experiences. Ashes was recorded at Rusk in Los Angeles, another great place. It had an echo chamber that was built for Aretha Franklin, actually. But it's my memory kind of shuts out with the last records that we did, the very last, just except for Scriptures.
Yes. So then,
Jesus Christ was
yes, and I was
definitely
going to say, and then you sort of leave the band and then go to
Yeah.
Amsterdam. So how did you manage to make that kind of change and leap? Was it two children you had at that stage?
Yes, yes. Well, I'd been going to Rotterdam before I left Christian Death, and going to a jazz venue, a free jazz venue in Rotterdam. That's something else. Like with music, I've always been really into like certain jazz vocalists, and I love experimental music and avant-garde music. And I went to this place called Thelonious, and it was a free jazz and experimental jazz center. And I started. I found out that I could meet some of the musicians. I was really lucky. I got to sing with this one artist who had played with John Coltrane, the Reverend Frank Wright, who is a really extreme free jazz artist. And I actually met Woody Shaw there. We sang some blues together. He's a terrific, very famous American trumpeter who ended up there. A lot of old jazz musicians, or say middle-aged jazz musicians, would end up in Holland or Germany because they could find jobs teaching and playing. And I met quite a few artists there, and we would put together kind of little jazz orchestras, and I would be allowed to sing. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but just I had some kind of sense about it, and was taken under the wing to a degree. But in order to be a real protege, I had to really be with somebody, be with one of these artists, and I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to be taken on my own for my musicality. And
Yes.
I did quite a bit there. I ended up working there. I'd go when Christian Death wasn't on tour. I would go over to Rotterdam, and I would actually work there, preparing the backstage area. And then when these bigger artists, James Blood Ulmer, Sun Ra had played there. A lot of great artists played there. Cecil Taylor, Mal Waldron. I met Mal Waldron, and he was telling me about his proteges and everything, and he was fantastic. Just improvising for 2 hours with a pearl necklace of Billie Holiday wrapped around his wrist, and so that was a really great time to learn about music. And so I
Yes.
did that, and that connected me to Amsterdam, is where this is going. It connected me to Amsterdam. I was offered to do a solo show in Amsterdam, and I had met an upright bass player that we had a really great rapport with, and we decided to do a show in Amsterdam, and it was really all improvisation. And we did that, and I met somebody in Amsterdam who had been a big fan of Christian Death, and I got connected with him, and that's why I moved to Amsterdam. And I did
Right.
have kids. Yeah, I had the kids, and it was difficult kind of breakup, but it had to happen. It really had to happen. had to get out of that band.
Yes, quite a lot of people have that same feeling sometimes. But then,
Yeah.
yes, you sort of released two singles quite quickly, didn't you? A Heavenly Melancholia and Lullabies for a
Mhm.
Troubled World, which then came out
Yeah.
as a compilation on Cleopatra Records, which is called, is it
Yeah.
Facets in Blue? So your solo career really takes off quite smoothly, doesn't it, at this stage?
Well, I suppose so. It it didn't seem smoothly at the time, but if you look back on it compared to what somebody might have to go through now, and especially emerging from a band like Christian Death and doing something entirely different, yeah, yeah, it was fairly smoothly.
Yes. And then sort
I
of
had
by the
I had support. I had good support from the person I was with
brilliant. There you go.
that time.
Was that Roz?
No,
No.
that was Nico. I had
Nico.
Nico, yeah. Somebody named Nico. That was my partner that I was living with, and he put a lot of effort into helping me get started as a solo artist.
Right. Yes.
But
That's
it was very weird though, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I was being kind of fed information. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. There were some bigger record companies interested. And I really didn't want to go commercial, but there was an effort with Heavenly Melancholy to go commercial, and it really wasn't me. I didn't really know who exactly me was at the time. So it's taken me quite a while to find out.
yes.
But
And what
yeah.
other musical styles influencing you? Because in this country, obviously, I sort of mentioned the early 80s, and then by then, the mid 80s, we had a lot of that indie pop sound with people like the Smiths, and then ecstasy
Yeah.
comes along, and then we have the dance scene, which, obviously is
Yep.
quite big with people like the Stone Roses and Happy Mondays and Soup Dragons and
That's
Beloved, and
right.
there's the Chicago house sound and acid jazz, acid rock. No, what was it?
Yeah.
Acid house music. That's what I'm trying to remember. And then we had the
Hmm.
Seattle grunge scene coming over as
Yes,
well, which was,
that's
some,
right.
Nevermind comes out. So was that kind of
Mhm.
feeding into you at that
Well,
time?
well, it's all interesting, but what I discovered about myself and what I know now, I was really had a penchant for, but didn't know how to get it. The things that really, really turned me on whenever I'd hear them were more experimental sounds. And I did not know how to get that. I didn't even know exactly that was what I was looking for. Um, I was lucky enough to get to experiment a little bit. Christian Death had some experimental things going on at times. With like a what is it? Noise Hand Permeates, on Catastrophe Ballet, Awake at the Wall. Some of the tracks were more experimental, and some of them were poppier. I really like more experimental music, and I think that's why I really got into being involved with the free jazz and
Yes.
improvisation. Although it would always go into a wing of an instrument and everything, and that was fairly predictable. But yeah, I did a few, like the improvisation thing with the stand-up bass, and well, it's not really great example, but I found I really enjoy experimental more, and everything else is pop pretty much compared to it.
Yes. And then,
So
so with the mid 90s, you collaborate again with Roz, don't you, with this kind of album,
yes,
Dream Home Heartache, which has got
yeah,
cover versions by Hendrix and Brian Ferry. So
yes,
was that the first time you started to work again together after,
it
for
it
10 years?
was. Yes, it was. He had written me a letter after I left Christian Death that he wanted to work together again. And so I finally met up with him. I guess it was 91 or 92. And um, then we put together a tour. Well, the guy that I was with, Nico, put together a tour for us. We toured Europe with his band, my band opening for his band. And after that, we decided to do some recording. And we thought we'd just go in and make a single with Dream Home Heartache and Manic Depression, I guess. Those were the two songs. But when we went in, we had more time. So we made up the other songs. And then we toured with that album. And yeah, that's what happened. He stayed with us in Amsterdam quite a bit. And then he lived in Los Angeles also. So
yes. Did that feel like quite a nice experience after nearly 10 years to sort of have some sort of a bonding creative moment?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was great. It was really great. I was very nervous. And I had been really guilt-ridden about staying in the band without him, staying in that band. And so I was glad it was over and we could talk about it. And it was great to work together again, really great to work together. When I moved back to Los Angeles at the end of 96, and we and other friends were hanging around each other and playing a lot of shows together, different members in each other's bands. And yes, it was very good. It was very good, musically and friendship wise.
It's a great album, just brilliant album, isn't it?
Oh, thanks.
That's a good one. But then you do another solo album, which is Am I Wrong, in sort of 1998. So this one is back in LA, is it?
No, well, this album actually was recorded in Rotterdam before I left. I had done those recordings, and to be honest, they were demos. To be honest, they were demos, and I was in a real situation where I needed to release something. To get to make some money to have my kids and I survive a little longer in Los Angeles, just alone with each other. And again, a friend of mine and with influence, like Roz influenced me too. He said, well, you should put these out. These are excellent songs, put them out. And so I was able to put them out. And those songs were actually recorded around 96.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you have a much bigger budget for your follow-up album, which is kind of towards, was it 99? You bring out Stars of Trash, and this is quite a sort of different sonic quality at this stage, isn't it?
It is. It really is. So I've been doing backing vocals for a band called Dreadful Shadows, and they were very wonderful people, and it was a wonderful studio. And I was invited to come back to Berlin to record my album. I actually played them songs when I was there that I had written for the album. And so I wanted to get this album done. It had songs on it of friends of mine that had passed, like Roz and like a few other people that I'd been very close to that passed in 98. They'd committed suicide in 98 or overdosed. And I wanted to get this album done. And I was, my kids were living with their dad, and I was worried that about surviving in a situation I was in. And so I went over there, and I had actually made some demo tapes of the songs, and I got to the studio, and I was very, very immature, I suppose. I didn't know that producers could actually take your music and change it so completely, I didn't recognize some of the songs.
Right.
And they actually wanted, and now I think, well, of course they would want to, but then I was so naive. They wanted this to be a mass production and to have it be like a big hit in Germany, bring me out as a kind of German pop diva. And I didn't know any of this. I actually wanted the songs to be much less produced, more like with more acoustic sounds and a lot more organic. And what I was faced with was the record company, Eastaugh, getting really, really upset, holding up the production, the recording for some days until I was able to get a compromise where I could have some of the songs the way that I wanted them, and I could choose what songs they could produce the way they wanted to. And so that's how it worked out eventually. But it was, I was very, very naive. I have to say I've been very naive most all of my musical life, and just kind of gone by intuition and instinct and not always been right.
Yes.
So, and like I said, I didn't really even know that deeply I'm an experimentalist. And so we'll see what comes later, right? But so that's how that album got done. And it was indeed sold. It was going to be sold. There was a middleman who wanted to sell it to Warner Chappell, and everybody thought that I would go along with that, and it would have promotion in the US and in Europe, and it was in all the PlayStations in Germany when it first came out. At that moment, I had to go back to the US to look after my mother, who was very ill. So I was back in the States. There was a great deal, and I will insert here, there was a lot of machinery going on. It was very bizarre. That was primed for getting me involved with a major company that would, to my thought, basically enslave me, to be, continue repeating my work that was coming out and creating hits, which I don't even know if I could have ever do that.
Yes.
So I was involved with with this machinery going on. Nobody ever told me anything about it. It wasn't spelled out for me. Nina Hagen's drummer played on Stars of Trash, and he was a music lawyer, and he had changed the contract and told me, don't sign this until they give it to you in English. And they never gave it to me in English. I saw the company and argued with him of the record company of Eastaugh. And I think that he saw how hard-headed I was. But they eventually gave me some advance. I got back to the States. The contract from this middleman was sent to me, and it was absolutely ridiculous. And I just said no. And then I was reported as being crazy for not signing the contract and going along with it. And the album was taken off the PlayStations what do they call those play, where you can listen to a record?
Oh, yes.
You used to be able to listen to, a CD or whatever, the tracks. So that was removed, and that was in 2000.
Right. So that was Stars of Trash that you're talking about, that experience.
Yes.
So
And
that
it
was
never was released. It never was released, at least in, properly. It was bootlegged out of, I think, out of Russia or somewhere.
right. My God, that is
Yeah.
difficult. And at the same time, Roz was also in that terrible state and committed suicide. So you,
Well, that was in 98. That was before I went over. I went over to Berlin in 99. And those guys in the Bad Rebel Shadows were very nice. And so was the producer. But the whole business area, I just want to say that in case any of them ever listen to this, they were,
yes.
yeah.
So
But
then,
yeah,
yes. And how did you
Ross
cope with
committed.
the loss of Roz? Was that
Oh, terribly, terribly. And another of the very inner circle of our friends had OD'd in uh, late 97. And then Roz, on April Fool's Day. And I coped with it by just drinking. I, and that was in 98. I drank a lot. I married, I think I was probably maybe 45 or 50, something like that. I married like a 23-year-old guy that I'd known for a couple weeks. I was completely traumatized and didn't know what I was doing. And I will, say pretty mentally ill. Then we had a tour coming up in May. I had a solo tour coming up in May. And yet another dear friend committed suicide. My bass player committed suicide. So we were all very, very nutty at the time. We did do the tour and came back. And I continued to make toured in the States. And then yeah, I went over and did the Stars of Trash, and I looked after my mom. I got out of there and looked after my mom, taught myself to play guitar, and went into I really wanted to give up music at that point because my mind had been blown by all these commercial machineries that were underlying music for me, that I just didn't know anything about, and I hadn't been inducted into them by, in reality, any kind of
yes.
way. The companies I'd worked with had been really friendly and um, direct. So when I was looking after my mom, I taught myself how to play guitar, and I got into playing a form of guitar.
So how
So
many years were you in that stage looking after your mum back in, was it in LA you were stationed
no,
at
I was
that?
I was in Santa Clara County in San
Right.
Jose looking after
Yes.
my mom.
Right.
Uh,
And
yeah, that was I was there on and off for 2 years. I was there on and off for 2 years. I actually played some shows up there with another band, and yeah, I was painting in the attic, and playing guitar, writing songs.
right. So that was during the sort of the famous Millennium Bug period, wasn't it, where we thought it was all going to finish and planes were going to fall out of the sky, and then that didn't quite happen. So then, sort of as the as the years progressed, did you start to sort of find your path again and how to create and make music during that next period?
Yeah, I wrote on guitar, which was a first for me, and eventually that turned into a band called Christelle's. Um, when I was up at my mom's, I bought some toms that were very big. I taught a couple of kids to play along with the songs, but that didn't last long. I was really out of my mind, I think, and that's okay. A lot of us are. Um, so these kids, we actually did a show. these toms were really huge. I wanted to get the biggest drum sound I can. So they were kind of like timpani if you used mallets on them. And the beats were very simple for the songs I was writing on guitar. But it didn't last. I moved to Long Beach, which is south of LA, and lived there for a while, continued to write songs, did a lot of painting, which I lived off of. And eventually I turned this whole project with the guitar, like I was saying, into this band, the Crystals, with my daughter. My daughter came, and my kids came back to me, and I taught her to play beats on the maracas, and we were doing some little shows together around LA and Long Beach. And then I gave her these toms, and we got a ride cymbal and a snare, and we were playing a lot. We were playing really a lot, she and I, with the Crystals. She was very young, so we'd have to wait in the parking lot till it was our turn to play. And we were having a lot of fun. I mean, there's some videos of that online, I know, of some of our. Yeah. And we got a bass player. Bass player wanted to join, so we let a bass player in, and then we let another bass player in. We toured Europe with both bass players at different times. It was a good band. We put out one album, a vinyl, called Attach and Detach. I mean, we taught ourselves to play. We were really like quintessentially punk. Just we started to play shows before we really could hardly play, but we got a lot of experience, and we got very good at it. And we wrote another album. I wrote the album, and the studio that the tapes were in, actually the storage area was got burnt down, so we lost the tapes. There's only a couple songs that remain, but that's how it goes.
Yes, absolutely. But that's obviously quite a was it quite a healing process during that time with your daughter, and yes, making music in a very different lineup?
Well, what do you mean by healing?
Well, in the sense of, yes, good point, good question. In the sense of, yes, kind of being able to, did you say you reunited with her again after not seeing?
Yeah, my kids came back. First, my son did when I had a home again, a proper home, when I wasn't looking after my mom, because
Yes,
she had dementia very bad, Alzheimer's, so I had to be before. So that it was good they weren't around. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, well, it was wonderful to have my son back. I mean, beyond anything else, I love my children. So, first my son, and then my daughter. It was amazing to have them back, and I felt complete. So the music thing was just, it was like, I'm playing these songs. I was actually doing some shows just with guitar and voice. And so her accompanying me was great. And then she got really good on the drums, and it was fulfilling for her. The last album she was singing a few songs on, which she loves to sing. So it was an amazing experience. And yeah, in that way, them returning was just completely fulfilling and healing in that way. Playing music together was always just crazy, it's just a crazy moments.
Yes. Well, and probably yes. I guess it's the dynamic between the group of you was probably as or more important than what the final product was or the final outcome. It was more to do with the yes, being able to do something as a unit and as a team and as a family, and that, I suppose that's why I refer to as healing, as a sense of creating a new history and a new narrative.
it was good. It's not that easy, but and we certainly didn't think of it that way. We did a lot of painting together. Also, she's quite an artist, and
Yes.
there were just the two of us on stage for a good few years first before we let anybody else in the band. So we would be accompanied by paintings as well. We have paintings on stage.
Excellent. A multimedia production. We love those.
Yes, that's right.
This is always good. You've got to push the boundaries. So then 2013, was it 2013 you start doing other projects as well? Or you do Moonlit Paradise?
Oh, first there was, let's see, it was Reflecting Shadow, which was a solo album. And that was one of the bass players, the last bass player in Christel's. We had two. He was quite an instrumentalist, and he created the arrangements for songs for Reflecting Shadow. And that was a solo album. And then there was Hidden Tears, Moonlit Paradise. And that was again with Jean-Paul Gardier, who did the arrangements for the Reflecting Shadow. And
yes.
We had planned to go on with that band, but I actually wrote for a year for the album for Hidden Tears. A whole year was put aside for writing for that, and Jean-Paul had created music for it. We recorded the album, and it was on computer, and it was destroyed. So there was no Hidden Tears album, which we had planned on. And so I just said, oh, well, the hell with it, and just started something new, which turned into GDQ, the Gitane Demone Quartet.
Right. So this was your next kind of big kind of project. But because you'd sort of really started to develop your sound and your kind of sonic quality at this stage. It seemed like your experimentation and your sort of vocals were beginning to become much more kind of confident and established.
Yeah, I was treading ground that I was much happier with, that I knew I wanted to go somewhere with it. It wasn't the same old, kind of pop format, although some of Reflecting Shadow is. I hadn't really evolved out of that area yet, but the instrumentation is closer to what I was sort of searching for.
Yes. So your first album as the quartet, is this Past the Sun? Was that the first release?
Yes. Yes.
And this is with Deb, Paul, and Rick.
Yes.
And
that's
this is
right.
the one. This is one. So by then, were you feeling like this was much more of an established lineup and a project?
Yeah, this was something that I felt I'd been waiting for. I really found myself that all things were possible here. Although we did have the kind of idea that we were going to work with repetitions, but try to explode the repetitions. Like the idea was to say you're in a box, but sonically you could explode at certain points in the box so that you'd forget about the repetition and go more into the areas that were sort of like going outside the box, which
right.
which we felt we could do, and we could do live, and experimenting with some shows I put together that were with like punk orchestras that were 17 piece orchestras with the repetition that just everybody just rode over it, but somehow managed to come back into it. So yeah, it was a great experiment.
Did you then bring out a second album at that stage towards the end of the decade?
Yeah, we did. We did Past the Sun. We did some Strata Strip. That was the second album.
This was on Dark Vinyl Records,
Yes.
and it was all going terribly well. And then the Decade appeared, didn't it? And then, was that the last album you did before the lockdown period?
It was.
Yes.
It was. Yeah.
How did you how did you cope with lockdown for those first couple of years? Did you go back to writing and painting, or?
No, well, I was working on a conceptual, what I was calling an experimental opera, because it had a libretto. I wrote a libretto for it, and it was a project that started actually around 2016, I guess, maybe 2015. I'd been contacted by an experimental and ambient and noise artist from Germany, who goes just by the initial N.
Mm-hmm.
And he approached me to do a collaboration. It took a long time, but he sent me some tracks, and I really liked them a lot. And I started hearing things that I could do, and that's the main thing, is if I can hear my voice in something. So I started working on it, and he sent more tracks, and he said, you can pick and choose whichever tracks you like, or whatever, however you want to do it. And I liked all of them, so I made the story up. It was supposed to come out this fall. The box set Despair, we could really only afford to have 100 of them made up. It's very long, so there's 4 vinyls, and I have a book with the libretto, the lyrics, and illustrations that my daughter painted. And it's a story basically about a man he's an elderly man, and he's confined to a wheelchair, and he is deteriorating, and his mind is now deteriorating. He lives on a mountaintop up in the woods. He lived there, I guess, 40 years. He had moved there with his wife and children, and she passed, and the children are looking after him now. The cabin mansion that they live in, he discovered, are actually built on burial grounds, Native American burial grounds, and that haunts him.
Mm.
And finds out his ancestors were involved with the extermination of 3 different tribes, and he's very haunted. And he's the whole opera, if you were to see it, would be this man in a wheelchair, and the story is all narrated coming out of his mind. So, and he's slowly losing it, and just the haunted, there's a lot of information about the tribes and what happened, and a lot of natural phenomenon is in the lyricism as well. And so he basically doesn't want to leave his children with his madness, so he does something about it, and that's all I'll say.
Yes.
We could only afford to have 100 of these made, because they're kind of an art project almost.
Well, absolutely. So are they available on your website, by the way?
They're not available yet. I made on my Facebook, I actually made a promo for it, because I've been waiting for them. They're all complete. They're completed, but they're in Germany, and they haven't been sent to me yet. There are 3 investors involved, and we'll each get 33 of them to sell.
Right.
And they're late coming, and I haven't heard from my German collaborator. So I imagine he's very busy, but I'm waiting for them. So in the meantime, the new Young Kings of Midnight has come out. So
absolutely.
That project, I finished recording it for Despair. I finished recording it during the virus time, the lockdown time. I went to Paul, and we finished recording it, the second session, and it was done. So that was in development during during the virus time. And Paul and I had begun, we had begun a couple of tracks for New Young Kings of Midnight.
Right, because that's so it's a 7-track album that's coming out, and it's an absolute it's such a fantastic album. So
thank you.
So being listening to it quite a lot in the last 5 days, there's a lot kind of going on. Is there a story? Because it starts with a track called Funeral, which obviously it mentions things like move the stone, enter the tomb, and it has quite a vivid kind of imagery to it, and then it goes right through to different types. So is this a concept album of sorts?
Yes, I had asked Paul to create the music for me, because I knew I couldn't, there's no way I could do it. And so it's about the life of, say, someone like Roz, or a young star, somebody who rises to stardom. I started this as a big thank you to Roz for such a wonderful being such a wonderful friend and musical luminary in my life. And so I wanted to write this, and it's a story of the life and death. And how can I put this? I could say it in a few words. So, say these brilliant artists are born, and the second track on there, the third track, let's see.
There's the third track, Exquisite Fits of Delirium, but the second track...
That's right. The third track kind of puts it in a timeline, and this was the one track where I didn't feel I could be completely have my complete experience involved in it. So it was great, because this part is about the era that punk was born, where the whole mask energy, the mask in LA, where the punk kind of came out of, and the LA punks kind of came out of, and Roz and Darby were a part of that. So that's where that piece springs from. That's the time.
Yes.
The period. So there's the birth with Core, and the time period, and then the area where he's beginning to perform, or where there's the performance and the rise to stardom. And
because going back to your second track, is it Cora you pronounce it?
It's called Core, which means heart in French.
Right, because your vocal, it's a much more, the rhythm is much more staccato, isn't it? And your vocals are incredibly amazing. I mean, just extraordinary sort of dexterity and sort of ability to sort of express so much. So it's quite an interesting, because I said, Funeral, has kind of imagery of moving the stone and enter the tomb. And then you have Exquisite Flight is much more calm, and there's a sort of a sense of, like a little bit more stability. But then what I find, so your track, The New Young King of Midnight, that reminded me a little bit of a musical. I don't know, something like Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't know if it did.
I know what you mean. It's a little bit like Kurt Weill-ish or something.
Yes.
Right? Maybe a little bit, or maybe not. I don't know, something. What did you say?
I remember growing up, and there was a soundtrack of Jesus Christ Superstar, and it had this very expressive performance. It was like kind of real musical theatre, and I just thought, God, this sounds really, it has that kind of spirit. I could imagine it being performed on stage.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, it was reminiscent to me of something kind of almost cabaret
Right.
and like maybe close to what you're saying, very dramatic anyway, and theatrical.
Yes.
But yeah, so we move from, okay, so we start with the end basically, and then move into the birth of somebody and their environment growing up, and then they move into becoming a persona and worshipped and doing well, and then where that takes them,
Yes.
where that takes them there. And then Paul and I, we had a whole lot of discussion about the piece. This was, you can tell by the actual music itself how much Paul put into it. I still can't get over it. Just the layers and layers that he put into creating this music. I felt like this doesn't need any voice to it, It's great the way it is.
But it's
But
interesting. So my sort of the favorite track on the album is the fifth one, Feather, which has got this amazing ride until the end, and it reminds me a little bit of that essence of some of David Bowie's latter work as well. So how does Feather relate to this kind of narrative in your mind? But I just love that last minute in it, and it's a 5-minute track, and there's something quite magical as it builds up towards the end.
Right, it's very storybook like. So one of the discussions Paul and I had, it started out as my kind of ode to Roz, but because of the story and the suicide, he said, well, this is now about my experience with Darby too. So anyway, we started discussing what could they have achieved if they had not committed suicide, right? What if they had gone another way? And so Feather is all about, it's about how we were affected, how, say, Paul and I individually were affected by our friends committing suicide, and then looking what could have been possible. So since I was writing it, these are all memories that I have. So if he hadn't died, maybe he could have become a father. Maybe he, maybe he could have done a lot of different things besides just continuing to be an artist. And I say just because there was so much stress involved, and there was a lot of stress involved for him and disappointment. So maybe he could have been a father and shown her everything that he knew, or a male child. So this was one way of encapsulating maybe something that could have happened, if because Roz, for instance, loved children very much, so maybe he could have been a father. And I love this piece that Paul wrote. Some of the other pieces were very difficult, and he said that he decided to give me a break with this piece. It's kind of rollicking rock song at the end, So,
yes. Well, no,
yeah.
it's I just recommend anybody to listen to the whole album, but especially that song. But I think it really works as a piece. So then April 1st, obviously that is the date, isn't it, where Roz
that's the date. That's the date that Roz committed suicide. And again, this is looking at another area where if he hadn't, maybe he would have found something that was very important to him, and that's finding somebody, a lover that would be just for him, and where love could work out and could learn from that, and it would. So if that's basically that part of the story, again, that was very important to Paul and I discussing this, that to show that there could be other possibilities had both Darby and Roz lived. Yeah.
Because I don't know why, but I wrote the word rejection next to April the 1st. Was there a theme of rejection in that song?
In this song, it
In
says,
in April the 1st, was there a sense of
yeah,
rejection?
past father of stone, cold rejection. Yeah, because the his you know ex his experience with his father was like he wasn't accepted for
Right.
so close to the end of his life. I remember him telling me quite a bit. So it seems like his father was actually supportive in the beginning, but they had his dad was very religious. They had his dad had rejected who he was, and then he wondered if he was Jesus. So, very, yeah. Lots,
Yes,
lots
tricky,
of
tricky
ideas about
moment,
it.
really. But
Yeah.
then the last track, Come, which is kind of there's again a line sort of is it Mother come back? Yeah, come back to you. So this is a sense of returning back to the womb. Did I read that
Yes.
right? Yes.
Yes, you did. Yes. And it's actually in a song from Roz Williams, that
Right.
line. So I was kind of happy to be able to put that in for him too. So yes, you're right. And
Wow.
you're just wonderful. I'm a terrible person to interview, and I'll tell you, typical tragic, kind of musical life and emotional life in a way, but I have a really positive outlook. I don't know if I'm going to be doing more music. I've been caregiving for a few years. Rick had very severe head trauma in January
Right.
1st, and I've been looking after him. And it's so I'm doing that now, and working on another, just to keep busy, working on another band. And we're actually covering a couple of really avant-garde Scott Walker songs and writing our own songs as well. So I think it's really difficult for them because my penchant for doing more experimental work is driving everybody nuts. So I don't know where that's going to go. But you're really lovely to put up with my flutterings and flusterings as I try to
Oh, that's fine. But
interview.
no, but it's an amazing journey and an amazing story, and coupled with so much beyond the music, which is always difficult to navigate. And one is kind of spinning these kind of plates and trying to have some focus and some time to keep one's own life spirit alive, which is
Yes. Yeah. Well, I wish I could tell a tale of just, stringing one thing to another, but it's so intertwined.
Yes, well, absolutely. There is a narrative, and it's amazing that you've had Paul sort of been
Uh,
there for the last 10 years, keeping.
oh my gosh. He's just been, he's like my favorite person. He really is.
Yes, it's
Yeah. Paul is like my favorite person. And I just adore working with him, talking with him, hanging out with him. He's just always just amazing.
yes.
Amazing friend.
So with this album that's just coming out December 2023, which is going to be available on Bandcamp and probably CD, then next year you've got this limited edition release of 100 copies coming out, and then hopefully another kind of release later on in the year.
Well, who knows?
Who knows? This is true.
Who knows?
Who knows?
If I stopped, this record with Paul I'd be happy with that, But every time I try to stop with music, it just sort of like grabs me by the neck, and I won't let go.
Don't let go. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You just got to keep it going. I mean, your vocals, I have to say, your vocals and the musical arrangement on this album just out are stunning. I mean, it would be awful not to hear kind of more music in the future with such a great kind of vibe and the sonic quality.
Well, thank you very much.
So yes, and it's a lovely kind of the record label. I don't know what your experience, but it seems good. And actually, I do like the cover as well, which is beautifully put together.
Yeah, I like it too. I've been friends with Dark Vinyl for quite a long time. I've known them since the 90s, and they've always been really good to me and personally. And yeah, they're wonderful. I don't, all they have to do is just put the work out, and they've been willing to do that with and it's probably always a little bit out of genre for them, but they know me very well, so
Yes,
they're
they should
willing to
do.
do that.
And it's great because you've got a Bandcamp page with virtually all your solo projects on, haven't you, as well? So anybody can. So
Yes.
you've got all that archived. So that's brilliant. I mean, if you could have whispered something to like your 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything in particular that you might have said? Oh, yes, I would have mentioned that to them, even if they ignored you being young.
Oh God. That's difficult because life is really full of changes. I guess to just, I don't know, do everything you can to follow your dreams. Just,
Yes.
I can't, like I told you, I wish that I would have known sooner what a musical weirdo I was, and that I was really the experimental and avant-garde were really, really at the core of me. But I had to go through all these other areas to find that out, and so I couldn't really give advice except just don't give up. I think a lot of people give up too soon when they're trying something. If it doesn't just work out the way they want it to, do it for yourself and keep going.
Yes. And
Yeah.
also, with a few people, I think they've often got to that point where they regret having a break. Whereas with your career, you've, pretty well from 81, the late 80s, no, early 80s, to now, there's been a good body of work. And I think you can't take that away because it's there and it's done. And I think a lot of people feel a bit disappointed when they go, oh, there was 20 years when I just got disillusioned and didn't do anything. Whereas actually you've kept a kind of a sort of momentum going.
Well, thank you. There's also a lot of work that has fallen by the wayside, or that hasn't been released. And just a couple years ago, I realized that I hadn't stopped. Just seriously, a couple of years ago, I thought, oh my God, I really I haven't stopped with this stressful life of music. I haven't stopped. Just for a matter of months at a time. And then I realized, well, I guess you are legitimate.
Yes, you can say that. Yes, I know. Well, Ringo Starr once said that, didn't he? I think right at the end of the Beatles. Did we pass the test? And probably Ringo. I think you have. And I think that's, with that body of work and, especially your latest work, which kind of reminded me a lot of, because I was, mentioned at the beginning, my love of David Bowie and his kind of career,
Oh, yeah.
which was always there with me through my adult life. And then sort of Black Star.
Right.
And you just thought there's elements of that also in this new album as well of Black Star.
Oh, goodness. Wow. That's
So,
tremendous of you to say that. Thank you.
yeah, I mean that lyrical quality, but then both of you have got a lot to sing about, which are quite, pretty raw material, really, isn't it? So, yes, that's the true artist, really, isn't it? So, there you have it.
Well, well, I just want to thank you for being patient, like I said, with my fluttering sentences and ums and ahs and
Oh no, God, it's magic. Well, look, I'll let you rock on because obviously you've got a lovely afternoon. I'm going to go to bed, but thank you again for your time. And
Thank you.
yes, like I said, when Paul mentioned that he'd done this album with you a few months ago, or probably longer, I was very curious. I thought, oh, no. So when it came out, I was very excited. So, and I haven't been disappointed. So thank you for that. And
Thank
I'll keep in touch, and I'll send you a link as well, and then you could post it on your social media page.
I will do. Thank you so much, David.
Okay, have a lovely day and take care of yourself.
You too.
Thank you.
take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was the end of the interview, as you probably guessed. Anyway, that was me in conversation with Gitane Demone, talking about her new album with Paul Rosler, titled The New Young Kings of Midnight, which is available on Bandcamp and various other places, plus CD. You can find that on Dark Vinyl Records, which is a German label. Anyway, this has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show, you'll find it there. Also, all these interviews have been archived. Aren't you lucky? And you can see those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true, including one with Paul as well. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.